Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to start talking about verbs. Now, what is a verb? Well, in English, verbs will start with the word to. Here are some examples. To go, to eat, to like, to see, to be. Now, a verb is anything that someone or something does. You can go somewhere, you can eat, you can like, you can see, you can be. And in English, verbs are usually conjugated, meaning that you'll change them in some way, depending on how they're being used in a sentence. For example, to go. He goes. They go. I will go. He went. Korean also has verbs like these, and verbs that are talking about doing something, some sort of action. Well, those are called action verbs. Going, eating, doing, anything like that. And just like in English, although in a different way, Korean verbs will also conjugate when they're used in a sentence. So, every Korean verb ends with ta before it is conjugated. That means when you search a word in the dictionary, if it ends with ta, it likely is a Korean verb. Here are a few examples. 가다, to go. 먹다, to eat. 좋아하다, to like. 보다, to see. 이다, to be. So far, we've actually used a couple of these. We've used 가다 already when we said 안녕히 가세요. The 세요 we'll learn about later. We also used to be, 이다, when we said 저는 이에요 or 저는 에요. However, unlike English, you don't have to conjugate Korean verbs differently depending on who is doing it. So I, he, she, like that. In Korean, they would all use the same conjugation. For example, in English you might say, I swim, Billy swims. Well, both of those would be 수영해요, swims. 저는 수영해요, I swim. Or 빌리는 수영해요, Billy swims. And just like in English, Korean verbs will conjugate differently for the different tenses, as in past tense or future tense. In English, you might say, I swim, I swam in the past, or I will swim, or even I am swimming. And Korean also, 저는 수영해요, I swim. 저는 수영했어요, I swam. 저는 수영할 거예요, I will swim. Or 저는 수영하고 있어요, I am swimming. Now, we're not going to be learning all of those conjugations in this lesson. We'll take them one at a time. First of all, we're just going to learn standard conjugation for these verbs. So here are how to conjugate those 5 verbs from before. To go, 가다, will become 가요. To eat, 먹다, will become 먹어요. To like, 좋아하다, will become 좋아해요. To see, 보다, will become 봐요. To be, 이다, will become either 이에요 or 에요, as we learned before. Now, we're just learning these verbs as is. You can just write them down, but later we will be discussing exactly how you can conjugate your own verbs and how that works. So before we go any further, practice making the following 5 sentences on your own using those verbs. So, I go, I eat pizza, I like kimchi, I see Billy, and I am name, as we learned previously. Let me go over some examples. I go, 저는 가요. I eat pizza. You might have just written, 저는 피자 먹어요. We're going to be talking about something called the object marker later, which is this 를 you see here, and it's used whenever a verb has any sort of object, or whenever a verb is doing something to someone or doing something to something else. And we will talk about this in detail in a future lesson. I eat pizza. 저는 피자를 먹어요. I like kimchi. 저는 김치를 좋아해요. I see Billy. 저는 빌리를 봐요. I am name. 저는 빌리예요. If you didn't get these sentences right, don't worry, it's okay. We will be covering all of these topics again in detail in future lessons. Now, before we go, some really quick notes. Just remember that Korean sentence structure is subject, object, verb. As we had before, I eat pizza. In Korean would be I pizza eat. So it would be incorrect to say 저는 먹어요 pizza. I eat pizza would not mean that in Korean. It must be I 피자를 먹어요. I pizza eat. And although I introduced that object marker here briefly, we will be covering it in much more detail in a future lesson. For now, simply be aware that the object marker exists, and if you'd like to know, it is after a consonant or 를 after a vowel. So today we got a very brief introduction to verbs and how they work, and in the future we'll go into much more detail. Thanks for watching. Make sure to practice what you've learned in the lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.